I stood in the doorway of what used to be my guest bedroom, watching my husband Marcus pack the last of his belongings into cardboard boxes. His pregnant girlfriend, Sophia, lounged on my antique rocking chair, rubbing her belly with the smugness of someone who believed she'd won the ultimate prize. The irony wasn't lost on me. That chair had once belonged to my grandmother, the very one she'd used to rock me to sleep as a child. I'd always imagined using it someday to soothe my own baby. Instead, here it was, cradling the woman who'd bulldozed my marriage with the kind of smug satisfaction only a homewrecker could wear. The DNA results came back, I said quietly, holding the manila envelope that had arrived that morning. Marcus looked up from the box he was taping shut, his expression darkening into the self-righteous anger that had become his default since he'd announced Sophia would be moving into our home 6 months ago. I don't need to see anything, Elena. We've been through this. The baby is mine. Sophia needs support. And you need to accept that our marriage is over. Sophia shifted in the rocking chair, one hand protectively gliding over her 7-month bump. At 23, she was 15 years younger than me, with that dewy, fresh-faced beauty that made some men forget the women who'd walked through hell beside them. Her blonde waves fell in perfect curls despite a morning supposedly spent packing. Her maternity dress designer, and probably more expensive than most people's rent. Marcus is right, she chimed in, her syrupy voice weaponized with sweetness. It was the same tone that, apparently, convinced my husband to discard a 12-year marriage like it was a pair of old socks. We need to focus on our future and our baby. This would all be so much easier if you just accepted the inevitable and signed the divorce papers. I smiled small, measured, the way I had during tactical interrogations in Afghanistan. Inside the envelope were results that would shatter their carefully constructed fantasy. But more than that, it was validation. For the months I'd been gaslit, minimized, discarded, for every quiet suspicion I'd followed, every piece of evidence I'd uncovered while they treated me like an inconvenient relic of Marcus's past. "Oh, I'll sign the papers," I said as I stepped into the room. Sophia's room now, apparently, redecorated in pastel tones with baby furniture paid for by money from our joint account. Money Marcus controlled. But first, I think you should know who the father of that baby really is. Sophia paled, her smug expression evaporating like steam. For a moment, she looked as if she might faint. Marcus froze mid-motion, a photo of the two of them at some candlelit restaurant suspended in his hand. The silence that filled the room stretched long and taut, charged with something volatile. "What are you talking about?" Marcus demanded, but his voice had lost its bite. I lifted the envelope with slow, deliberate grace, savoring the moment. "Because according to these DNA results," I said, opening the flap, "the baby Sophia is carrying belongs to Detective Ryan Martinez of the Oakland Police Department." Marcus blinked. "Ryan? But he's married. He has kids. He was my partner for 6 years. He was your best man at our wedding." I nodded, pulling additional documents from the envelope, including photographs. "The same Ryan Martinez who's been having an affair with your pregnant girlfriend for over a year." Sophia sprang to her feet with more agility than someone 7 months pregnant had any right to display. Her expression cycled rapidly. Shock, fury, panic. "That's impossible. You're lying. You couldn't have gotten DNA results without my consent." I held up a clear plastic bag containing a hairbrush. "This belonged to you. You left it in our guest bathroom during one of your many overnight visits." It's amazing what modern science can do with a few follicles. Once I had samples from both potential candidates, identifying the father was easy. Marcus was staring at the papers in my hand like they contained nuclear launch codes. "Ryan," he said again, disbelieving. "But he wouldn't do this." "He did," I replied coldly. "These were taken outside the downtown Marriott, The same weekend Sophia told you she was at her sister's baby shower. I handed Marcus the photographs. Sophia and Ryan, kissing in the parking lot. Ryan's hand cradling her belly, entering and exiting the hotel together. Dinner receipts, matching room charges, proof. Sophia lunged for the documents, but I stepped back without hesitation. My military training made my movements automatic. Don't, I warned. Destroying evidence won't help you now. I have copies, lots of them. Marcus turned toward Sophia, his jaw slackening. The analytical mind that had made him a good detective was beginning to process the magnitude of the betrayal. What is this? He whispered. You said you love me, that the baby was ours. I cut in. She's been running this scam for years. A professional con artist, targets law enforcement and military men, especially those going through midlife crises. Ryan was her partner. You were the mark. The air in the room grew heavy. Marcus stumbled backward, lowering himself onto the edge of the bed we'd shared for 12 years. His face had gone an ashen gray. Sophia didn't sit. She stood stiffly, the trapped look of someone watching a carefully built house of cards collapse. But why? Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. I turned away, toward the window that looked out onto our backyard, the one I dreamed of filling with a vegetable garden and children's laughter. Because you were perfect for their operation, I said. A decorated detective, a stable marriage, access to federal-level investigations. The baby that was never about love. It was leverage, insurance. Behind me, Marcus let out a small, broken noise that sounded like disbelief crashing into realization. This was just the beginning. They didn't know yet what else I had, but they would soon. Because in exactly 30 minutes, Detective Sarah Chen from Internal Affairs would be knocking at our door with a warrant and some very pointed questions. And I still had one final revelation to share. The house at 847 Maple Ridge Drive had been my sanctuary for 12 years. A quiet two-story colonial in Riverside, California, tucked away on a tree-lined street where neighbors still waved and left casseroles when someone was sick. American flags fluttered from porches. Kids played hopscotch on the sidewalks. And Marcus had carried me over the threshold one rainy Tuesday in November. Both of us laughing as we dripped onto the hardwood floors we'd spent weeks refinishing by hand. We were young then, naive, maybe, but full of hope. Marcus had just made detective with the Riverside Police Department. I had just been discharged from the army chest full of medals, heart full of trauma, and a head full of dreams about building something ordinary and beautiful. Inside, traces of that life remained like artifacts from a happier time. Wedding photos lined the mantel, showing Marcus spinning me on a dimly lit dance floor, his eyes glowing with adoration. Vacation pictures documented moments of normalcy camping in Yosemite, walking the Golden Gate Bridge, curled up on the couch while he read case files and I drafted security reports. But now, those images felt like evidence preserved from a crime scene, a memorial to a life no longer recognizable. The house had become a theater for betrayal, every room a stage for deception. And I had been too trusting to see the performance until the third act was already underway. 6 months ago, things started to shift. Marcus began coming home later, claiming the department was overwhelmed by budget cuts. He'd sit at the dinner table distracted, picking at the meals I made, offering vague answers when I asked about his day. Our conversations, once fluid and intimate, became tight, transactional about bills, maintenance, schedules. I blamed the stress. After all, I traveled often for my work as a private military contractor. We were both under pressure. And then came Sophia. At first, she was just a name, a new dispatcher. Marcus had said over dinner one night in January, "Poor girl's been through a rough divorce, custody issues, financial problems. Everyone at the station's trying to help her out." I nodded, proud of his compassion. Marcus had always been protective, especially of people he saw as vulnerable. That was one of the things I'd loved about him, his ability to shield the broken, not exploit them. She's been working overtime, he continued, trying to save up to move into a better apartment so her ex can't use the living conditions against her in court. I offered a sympathetic smile. Maybe we should invite her over for dinner sometime. Let her feel some normalcy. Marcus looked up, surprised. That's actually a great idea. I didn't know then that I'd just invited the enemy into my home. When Sophia arrived that Saturday evening, she wore a pale blue dress that made her look younger than her 23 years. She was petite, with big brown eyes and soft-spoken gratitude that would have melted any heart. Marcus talks about you all the time, she said as she hugged me. He's so proud of your military service. I'm honored to meet you. The words sounded sincere, too sincere, practiced. I pushed the doubt away. She was charming, thoughtful. She asked about my time overseas and listened attentively as I described the challenges of transitioning to civilian life. I had to start over at 23 too, she said softly. My ex convinced me to quit my job when I got pregnant, said I should focus on being a mom. But when I left him, I had no work experience, no money, nothing. Marcus reached across the table and squeezed her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles for a beat too long. You're doing great, he said. You're stronger than you know. I saw the way she looked at him then, like he hung the moon, and I saw something in him I hadn't seen in a long time. He looked back. That night, as we cleaned up the dishes, Marcus was energized in a way I hadn't seen in months. He praised her strength, her resilience, her gratitude. He spoke of her as if she were a cause to champion, not just a colleague. She reminds me why I became a cop, he said. To protect people who need someone in their corner. I smiled tightly and nodded, but something in me whispered a warning. The next few weeks confirmed what my instincts already knew. Sophia became a fixture in our conversations, then in our home, then in our lives. Her car broke down. Marcus to the rescue. Her landlord threatened eviction. Marcus spent the night helping her pack. Her ex allegedly missed a custody exchange. Marcus took the day off to help her file papers. Each time, I tried to be understanding. I reminded myself of all the people who had helped me after I returned from war: therapists, support groups, mentors. Marcus had been one of them. I knew what it felt like to be broken and afraid, but I also knew what boundaries looked like, and Marcus wasn't setting any. By April, she was calling him daily, often at night. Once during dinner, he excused himself mid-meal to take her call. She's panicking again, he said. Her ex is threatening to take their daughter. I just need to calm her down. He'd pace in the other room, his voice soft and steady, then return looking emotionally spent. She's really struggling, he said. She's not like you. She doesn't have a strong support system. The comparison landed like a punch to the gut. I began to notice other things. New shirts in his closet, trendier than his usual style, a renewed interest in working out, more time in the mirror, less time in our bed. And when he was there, he wasn't really there. By May, he was forgetting anniversaries, canceling plans. And then, the final blow, he announced that Sophia was moving in temporarily. Of course, her lease had ended. She needed stability. She's pregnant, he said, his tone defensive, and I'm the father. She needs a safe place to stay. Just until she gets on her feet. He said it like I had no say. Like I was the guest. Like the woman who'd built this life with him was just an inconvenience. So I smiled, nodded, and quietly began my own investigation. Because if there was one thing I'd learned in the military, it was this: the enemy always underestimates the one who smiles last. The first time I suspected something beyond infidelity, I was lying in our bed alone. Marcus gone again to help Sophia with a crisis. I stared at the ceiling, heart thudding in the quiet, and felt a ripple of unease that had nothing to do with jealousy. Something deeper, sharper. I'd spent my life learning to read danger. It was in the way someone's eyes shifted before they lied, the way patterns formed in seemingly unrelated events, the way people tried just a little too hard to appear helpless when they weren't. And Sophia had a pattern. Every emergency happened at the exact moment Marcus and I were supposed to reconnect. Every time we planned dinner, or an evening together, or even just a conversation about the state of our marriage, Sophia needed saving. One night, I sat alone at a restaurant. Our anniversary reservations made weeks in advance. Marcus had left an hour earlier to help Sophia move some furniture. He never showed. He texted me from her apartment. "I'm so sorry. Her babysitter bailed. I couldn't just leave. She didn't have a child. Not really. I didn't know that yet. But I was beginning to question everything." That night, I opened my laptop and began the same kind of search I used to run for government contractors overseas. Quiet, methodical, thorough. I started with the basics: public records, social media, property data. Sophia Martinez had an online presence too perfect. Instagram posts of her toddler, inspirational quotes, selfies with vague captions about resilience, but the metadata on her photos was off. Some were geotagged in Phoenix, Arizona. Others showed signs of being uploaded in bulk, not in real time. Her timeline didn't make sense. The posts from 2 years ago had no real engagement, as if they'd been backdated. The friends she tagged were ghost profiles, empty, inactive, possibly fake. Her employment at Riverside PD was real but recent, just 8 months ago. Before that, her history vanished into vagueness. The restaurant job she claimed to have during her marriage, no verification. The apartment she said she'd lived in with her ex, no record of tenancy. And then came the biggest red flag: the divorce papers. According to court records in San Bernardino County, Sophia Martinez had divorced a man named David Martinez 18 months ago. But the court filings revealed something crucial: their marriage had produced no children. None. There was no custody battle, no child support arrangement, no shared parenting plan, because there was no child. I stared at the documents, rereading them again and again as a chill spread down my spine. Sophia's entire backstory, her vulnerability, her struggle, her need for protection was a fabrication. This wasn't just a woman manipulating my husband with a sob story. This was a professional. And Marcus, he was just the latest in a long con. I shifted my investigation, looked deeper, broader. I pulled every tool from my digital forensics toolbox and began tracking money, IP addresses, travel logs. What I found turned my suspicion into certainty. Sophia Martinez was an alias. The real Sophia had died in a car accident 2 years ago in Phoenix. The woman in our home was actually Maria Santos, a 23-year-old from Tijuana with a string of fake identities trailing behind her like a shadow. She'd entered the U.S. illegally 5 years earlier and disappeared into the system, reinventing herself in one mid-sized city after another. And in each city, her pattern was the same target: a married law enforcement officer with access to sensitive information. Use a false story of abuse and helplessness to gain his protection. Establish a romantic relationship. And once the officer was emotionally entangled, start siphoning money, secrets, and access. She didn't work alone. In Phoenix, she'd partnered with a records clerk. In Tucson, a dispatch supervisor. And in Riverside, Detective Ryan Martinez. No relation. I checked, but the coincidence of the last name had likely been intentional, familiar, disarming. Marcus and Ryan had been partners, friends. Ryan had been the best man at our wedding. And now, he was the man fathering Sophia's child, or rather, Maria's. The scope of the deception was staggering, but the worst part wasn't what they'd done. It was how close they'd come to getting away with it. Because Marcus didn't just believe Maria's lies, he'd begun rewriting our entire marriage to justify them. He'd started keeping track of my business trips in a shared calendar, highlighting my absences, using them as emotional leverage. "You've been gone 14 days this month," he said one night. "That's half the time. How are we supposed to work on our marriage when you're never here?" I explained, again, that my work funded our lifestyle, that my contracts were necessary, that my absences weren't abandonment. But he didn't want understanding. He wanted justification. And Maria gave it to him. She was always there. She needed him. She made him feel wanted. I could see it happening in real time, the emotional grooming, the psychological manipulation, the way he began viewing me not as his wife, but as a barrier to his happiness. He started saying things like, "Sophia appreciates me," as if I didn't. He began positioning her as the victim, and me as the antagonist. "She's not trying to replace you," he said once. "She's just trying to build a better future. For her baby. A baby that didn't exist. A future that depended on dismantling mine." But Maria's mistake, their mistake, was assuming I was a passive observer. I had built my career dismantling criminal networks. I'd tracked terrorist financing through encrypted systems. I'd cracked shell companies and exposed black market pipelines. I wasn't just a wife watching her marriage implode. I was a weapon. And I was done watching. By the time Marcus came home late for the fifth night in a row, murmuring something about extra shifts and Sophia's unstable ex, I'd already transformed our home into a quiet surveillance outpost. The guest bedroom, Maria's sanctuary, had been rigged with military-grade cameras, invisible to the eye, wired into encrypted cloud storage, a precaution I'd taken weeks earlier when Marcus suggested Sophia move in just until she gets back on her feet. Funny. She seemed perfectly steady when she strutted through our house in designer maternity wear, sipping herbal teas and humming lullabies for a child that didn't exist. The cameras captured everything. The whispered conversations, the strategic phone calls, the way she'd linger in front of Marcus's framed police commendations as if memorizing details. Then came the footage that made everything fall into place. Ryan Martinez. He wasn't just in the house, he was comfortable in it, moving with familiarity. Using our back door. Never when Marcus was home. Never when neighbors were watching. One morning, while supposedly at a narcotics task force training, Ryan showed up at our house carrying takeout and a laptop bag. I watched from my home office, ostensibly away on a cybersecurity job in Denver, as he kissed Maria at the door and disappeared into the guest room. They weren't lovers trying to hide an affair. They were partners, operatives, running a mission. From my living room, I watched as they installed their own recording equipment, accessed files from Marcus's briefcase, photographed pages from case notes. Maria Santos moved with the efficiency of someone who had done this before. Ryan dictated, she recorded, and together, they mapped out something larger than just a love triangle. They were selling information, the targets federal agents, DEA operations, Border Patrol asset movements, informant lists, buyers still unclear, but the money trail didn't lie. In the course of 3 days, I tracked over $300,000, routed through crypto wallets tied to known shell accounts linked to cartel-backed laundering networks. The same networks I'd helped dismantle overseas. And somehow, these two had set up shop in my suburban guest room. They weren't just criminals. They were professionals working under the assumption that Marcus, a decorated detective battling a midlife crisis, would be too distracted, too emotionally compromised, to notice. They were almost right, but they'd underestimated me. As I compiled the surveillance footage, transaction logs, and audio recordings, I reached out to the only person I trusted with what I was about to reveal, Special Agent Jennifer Walsh. She answered my secure line after 2 rings. "Elena," she said, "it's been a long time. I've got something for you," I replied, "and you're going to want to sit down." Jennifer and I had worked together on financial crime investigations during my last contract with the DoD. She knew I didn't exaggerate, and she knew how seriously I took evidence. Within the hour, I had her encrypted access credentials and a direct FBI Dropbox. I uploaded everything: video, metadata, transaction maps, voice analysis. By morning, she called me back. Elena, this isn't just internal corruption, she said. This is organized conspiracy, federal security breaches, possibly treason, depending on who the buyers are. I figured, I said quietly. We need to move fast, but also carefully. We can't risk tipping them off. I understood. We were now playing a waiting game with lives on the line, especially Marcus's. Because what he didn't know, and what chilled me to my core, was that every other target Maria and her partners had manipulated like this had ended up dead. One had died in a house fire, another in a freak car accident, each marked as a tragedy. But each victim had been close to uncovering something before they tragically vanished. Marcus wasn't just a pawn, he was a loose end, and loose ends, in their world, got tied off permanently. I had to protect him even if I wasn't sure anymore if he deserved it. He'd betrayed me, lied to me, gaslit me, and yet, I had loved him. We'd built a life, shared a bed. He had held me during my nightmares and made me believe I could be whole again after war. He was many things, but he wasn't evil, just foolish and vulnerable, and manipulated by people who understood exactly how to weaponize guilt, masculinity, and the longing to matter. I watched footage of Marcus comforting Maria during one of her staged breakdowns, tears flowing on command, hands trembling, voice cracking just enough. Don't worry, he told her. I'm here. I'll protect you. Always. The words were familiar. He'd said the same to me once. Now, they were the reason I had to save him. Because the Marcus I married, the one who swore to protect the innocent, that man was still in there, buried under layers of shame, grief, and lies. And I would do everything in my power to dig him out, even if I had to burn the whole operation to the ground to do it. By the time Marcus had allowed Maria Sophia, to him, to move into our home full-time, I had already transitioned from surveillance to counterintelligence. This wasn't just about watching anymore. It was about intercepting, controlling, and ultimately dismantling a criminal operation being run from beneath my own roof. I began collecting samples, not just data, but physical evidence. Hair from Maria's brush, fingerprints from glassware she used and never washed, photocopies of every scrap of paper she left, unattended lists, receipts, phony medical appointments. I wore gloves when handling anything. Stored the files on secured drives hidden behind biometric locks in my basement. Marcus never noticed. He thought I was detached because I was grieving. In a way, I was, but not for him. For the life I'd once imagined here. The kids who were supposed to grow up in this house. The holidays I'd envisioned with laughter and chaos, not silence and surveillance. He thought I was numb. I was calculating. The night Marcus forgot our anniversary, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the bouquet I'd bought for myself so the house wouldn't feel so empty. I had prepared his favorite meal, lit candles, and worn the blue dress he once said made him fall in love with me. He never showed. He texted at 9:42 p.m. Sorry, Sophia had a panic attack. I couldn't leave her alone. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I put down the phone and started building my timeline. Each lie he'd told, every shift in behavior, every expense charged to our joint account for Maria's comfort, receipts, logs, time-stamped video, audio recordings of whispered conversations she had with Ryan while Marcus was out of the house. They were talking about him like he was a chess piece, a pawn. Ryan's voice, cool and dismissive. He's too distracted to see it. Guilt's doing most of the work for us. Maria's response. He still thinks I'm carrying his child. Once we're legally married, he'll sign off on anything we need. They had even discussed potential fallback plans if he became suspicious. Ryan again. If he starts asking the wrong questions, we stage something. Accidental overdose, suicide, whatever keeps the questions from going federal. That was the moment I realized this wouldn't end with divorce papers. They were going to kill him, eventually, when he outlived his usefulness, and he didn't even know he was disposable. I uploaded the recordings to the FBI server and called Jennifer. Elena, she answered. No greeting necessary. I'm listening. They're escalating. I said, they're preparing to use him for something big, something federal, DEA, maybe Homeland Security. Once they get what they want, he's a liability. Jennifer's voice sharpened. We've confirmed the financial links to 3 active organized crime networks. Cartel interests are in play. And there's chatter about a compromised federal task force. Your husband's a means to an end. What's our window, I asked. Maybe weeks, maybe days. Depends on how fast they move. But Elena, when we go in, we'll need Marcus to cooperate. If he resists, if he obstructs, I can't protect him from prosecution. I knew what she was really saying. He could go down with them if he didn't wake up soon. And that was assuming he survived. After we hung up, I walked through our house with new eyes. The kitchen, where I had once taught Marcus how to make pasta from scratch, now felt like a stage where he played husband for show. The dining room table we'd sanded and stained by hand now served as Maria's planning desk. Even our bedroom, the bed I once associated with comfort and safety, had been reduced to a ghost of intimacy. A place he no longer reached for me. I didn't cry. I prepared. Over the next 48 hours, I installed 3 additional micro cameras, replaced the hard drives Maria had been accessing with mirrored backups, and rerouted our home's Wi-Fi traffic through a VPN system so complex it would take the NSA a week to crack. By the time they realized I'd been watching, it would be too late. But I wasn't just watching anymore. I was maneuvering. I called an old contact, former Special Forces turned private recovery contractor. We'd worked together in Kandahar. He owed me a favor. I need someone watching Marcus 24/7, I told him. Discreetly. If you see anything that looks like a setup, extraction protocol goes live. No questions asked. He didn't even hesitate. You got it. Raptor. He was the last person who still called me by my old call sign. Raptor? Not wife. Not sweetheart. Not honey. Operator. Warrior. I spent that night going through old case files from my military days, trying to distract myself. But one image haunted me. The ultrasound Maria had taped to the fridge. Fake. I knew that now. The metadata on the image file she'd emailed to Marcus showed it had been downloaded from a maternity simulation website. It was a prop part of the illusion. A con. But Marcus stared at it every morning like it was sacred. He'd chosen to believe her lies over my truth. And that, more than the betrayal, made me realize what kind of war I was fighting. Not just one of evidence and facts, but of perception, emotion, belief. If I wanted to save him and dismantle the network that had taken over our lives, I couldn't just expose the criminals. I had to rewrite the narrative. Because Marcus didn't need facts. He needed to see the truth. And the truth was coming for them all. The shift in Marcus was subtle. At first, just hesitation, lingering glances, the way he paused before leaving the house to run another errand for Maria. The way his hand trembled slightly when he picked up his coffee mug in the morning, as if he couldn't quite hold the weight of his own choices anymore. He hadn't seen the surveillance footage yet. He hadn't read the documents or listened to the audio files I'd archived. But some part of him, some primal, intuitive part, knew that something wasn't adding up. Sophia Maria was too perfect in her helplessness. She needed him in just the right ways. Not too needy, not too independent. Just the exact cocktail of distress and gratitude to make a man like Marcus feel irreplaceable. It was calculated. And Marcus, once a seasoned investigator, had stopped investigating the moment it made him feel like a savior. One evening, as I made dinner, nothing elaborate, just grilled chicken and roasted vegetables, he stood in the doorway, watching me. Something about the way I moved, methodical and calm, seemed to unnerve him. Elena, he said quietly, have you been okay? I turned, arching a brow. Define okay. He ran a hand through his hair. I mean, all of this. The divorce. Sophia. I know it hasn't been easy. I smiled, just slightly. No, Marcus, it hasn't. He looked down at the floor, ashamed. Good, but not enough. She's just been through so much, he muttered, almost defensively. She needs support. Does she? I asked, drying my hands on a towel. Or do you need to believe that she does? He didn't answer, because deep down, he already knew. That night, while he slept in the guest room, the one Maria had turned into her command post, I watched the video feed as he stood over her sleeping form, his hand hovering near her shoulder, as if torn between comforting her and waking her up with questions he didn't yet know how to ask. He walked out instead. I made a note in my log, subject exhibiting internal conflict. Timeline may be accelerating. The next morning, he seemed distracted, over-caffeinated. He shaved even though it was his day off, changed shirts twice, then finally said, I'm going to the station. Need to check in on a couple of files. I watched his reflection as he said it. He was lying, but not to me, to himself. He wasn't going to work. He was looking for clarity, or perhaps he was hoping for confirmation that everything he feared wasn't true. He returned 4 hours later, looking 10 years older. I didn't ask where he'd gone. Instead, I went to my laptop and checked the GPS tag I'd planted under his rear bumper. He'd parked 2 blocks from the police department but never entered the building. He'd spent most of the time sitting alone at a cafe near the train station, staring at nothing, thinking, doubting. I knew that stage. It's what happens when cognitive dissonance begins to crack. When reality starts shouting louder than the lies we tell ourselves to feel safe. Marcus wasn't safe anymore, and neither was the illusion he'd chosen to live in. That night, I got a text from Jennifer. Our forensic unit has tied financial accounts used by Maria and Ryan to previous scams. 3 other jurisdictions, 2 confirmed deaths, 1 open federal case in Arizona. It was happening. The pieces were coming together. The net was tightening, and with every passing hour, Marcus was sliding deeper into a trap designed to consume him unless I pulled him out. I decided it was time to show him the envelope. Not the DNA results. I'd already played that card. No, this envelope was thicker, heavier, contained screenshots, transaction records, video stills, a timeline, a map, a dossier on Maria Santos, complete with her immigration records, aliases, and prior activity across California and Arizona. I left it on the kitchen table. No note, just the truth, wrapped in manila. I watched the security feed as he returned from another late-night grocery run. Maria had cravings. Of course. He stepped into the kitchen, dropped the bag of overpriced snacks onto the counter, and saw the envelope. He didn't open it right away. He stood there for a long time, just staring at it. Eventually, he picked it up and carried it to his office, our old shared workspace. He didn't come to bed that night. By morning, his eyes were bloodshot. He didn't say a word, but the look he gave me when we passed in the hallway was different, not hostile, not defensive. It was scared, not of me, of everything he'd just learned. The truth had finally landed. Now, the only question was, would he run from it or help me destroy it? The next morning, the kitchen was quiet. Too quiet. Marcus sat at the table, the same place where we'd once had coffee every morning, where we'd laughed over burnt toast and argued about politics and planned our future. Now, he sat there staring into a cup he wasn't drinking. the manila envelope still in front of him open, its contents neatly arranged like crime scene evidence. "I don't even know where to start," he said, voice hoarse, as I walked past him on the way to the fridge. "You could start by telling me what you plan to do," I replied, not looking at him. He ran a hand over his face. "I didn't know. Elena, I swear to God, I didn't know." I turned then, slowly. My voice stayed even. "You didn't ask. That's not the same thing." He flinched, but he didn't deny it. "I thought." He trailed off. "I thought she was broken. I thought she needed saving." I set a glass of water on the counter. "No, Marcus. She just needed someone willing to ignore the red flags because it made them feel heroic." He swallowed hard. "She said all the right things." I thought he stopped again. "Jesus, I'm an idiot." "Yes," I said, calmly, "but that's not the crime. The crime is what comes next if you don't help me stop them." He met my eyes then, and what I saw there gave me a flicker of hope, shame. "Yes, but something else too. Resolve. Tell me everything," he said. And so I did. For the next hour, I walked him through the timeline, the surveillance, the data, the financial transactions, the fake pregnancy, the real identity, Maria Santos, her record, her partners, the other officers she'd scammed, the ones who didn't survive. He didn't speak, just nodded occasionally, jaw tightening with every new revelation. I ended with the plan. "They're going to use you to gain access to federal case files. Drug Task Force intelligence, DEA informant lists. Once they have what they need, they'll kill me," he said flatly. I didn't confirm it. I didn't need to. "Jesus," he muttered again, sinking back into the chair like the air had gone out of his lungs. "You're not the only one they've done this to," I reminded him. "But you might be the only one who gets to survive it. If we act fast." He nodded, slowly, eyes distant. "Then what do you need me to do?" That was the moment I knew I hadn't lost him completely. Marcus Rodriguez was still in there. The man who wanted to do the right thing, who used to believe in justice. I opened a laptop and pulled up the live surveillance feed from the guest room Maria's base of operations. She was on the phone, speaking Spanish, fast and low. "She's planning a drop." I said, "End of the week, I need you to get access to your case files again quietly. Just enough to make it look like you're still useful. If she thinks you're getting nervous, she'll accelerate." And Ryan Marcus asked, "You sure it's him positive?" "He was in the house. I have video, audio, IP logs. He's been feeding her everything." Marcus exhaled sharply. "We worked cases together. He held my son when he was born." "You don't have a son, Marcus." I said. "She made that part up. Remember?" He winced. It was a low blow. I didn't care. "Fine," he said. "I'll play along. But we need to move soon." "We are," I replied. "Jennifer's task force is ready. They just need us to confirm when the transfer's happening." He stood, nodding, but there was a flicker of hesitation. "She's not who I thought she was," he said, "but I was. I did those things. I led her into our house. I betrayed you." "Yes," I said, turning back to the laptop. "But now you get to decide what kind of man you are next." That night, Maria acted as if nothing had changed. She floated through the house in soft slippers and a silk robe, making tea, asking Marcus about his day, resting her fake belly like she'd done 100 times before. But her eyes were sharper. Watching him, she could tell something was off. He was trying too hard to be casual, smiling too quickly, touching her shoulder when he didn't need to. She leaned in close. "You okay, baby? You seem distracted?" Marcus kissed her temple. "Just a long day. That's all." She didn't press, but I could tell she was logging it. A change in behavior. a deviation from the script. She was calculating risk. Good. Let her worry. The next 72 hours would either end in indictments or funerals. There was no middle ground anymore. Thursday morning came with a cold drizzle, the kind that soaked everything in silence. Marcus left early, claiming he had a meeting downtown. Maria watched him from the living room window, cradling her mug like a Hollywood widow, as if the act of loving him were exhausting. But she didn't fool me. She was waiting for something, watching for signs of weakness. I watched her back from my office, the surveillance feed open in a grid across 3 monitors. She made no calls, no texts. She just stood there, thinking, planning. By noon, Marcus called. They want the files. DEA task force rosters and asset movements from the last 90 days. Did you agree, I asked? I said I'd pull what I could. She smiled like I'd proposed. Good. Keep her calm. Don't give her reason to move the timeline. She already is, he said. She's packing. I sat up straighter. What she told me we should take a little trip once this is over. Lay low for a while, she said. She's prepping for the extraction. That meant the window was closing. Fast. Okay, I said, tell her you need 24 hours. Make up a delay. I'll inform Jennifer. After hanging up, I sent a secure message with the update. Within 15 minutes, I had a response target scheduled to make physical handoff of classified files. Friday, 6:30 p.m. Surveillance teams in place. Intercept greenlit. Do not engage. I wasn't good at following that last instruction, especially not when I saw Maria slipping into the garage later that afternoon. She opened the trunk of her car, removed a false panel beneath the floor mat, and retrieved a black zippered pouch. Inside were 3 phones, 2 passports, and a small silver case that made my blood run cold. Lockpicks, USB jump drives, Norwegian ampules in shock-resistant foam. She wasn't just running a scam. She was preparing for worst-case scenarios. She'd done this before, and she was prepared to vanish without a trace. I recorded the entire sequence, uploaded it to Jennifer. Then, I waited. That evening, Marcus returned home carrying a manila folder filled with redacted documents I had helped him forge. They looked official, but the data was fake. A perfect honeypot. Enough to draw her in enough to get her to commit. He handed them to her with practiced reluctance. Just the right mix of fatigue and frustration. You didn't say it would be this much, he told her. Maria's eyes lit up. It's perfect. Thank you, baby. She kissed him, slow and deep. I watched on the feed, nauseated. I reminded myself this wasn't betrayal. It was bait. Later that night, Marcus came to my room. He didn't knock. She's arranging the handoff for tomorrow evening, he said. Downtown parking garage. Same place Ryan met her last month. Will she go alone? No. She said I should come. Be her shadow. His face twisted. She wants to make sure I'm still under control. She doesn't trust you anymore, I said. She shouldn't, he replied. For a moment, we stood in silence. The air between us heavy with things we still hadn't said. After this is over, he began, I don't expect anything from you. Forgiveness. Understanding. Nothing. Good, I said, because this isn't about us anymore. He nodded, accepting it. We were no longer husband and wife. We were co-conspirators in survival. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept looping through every scenario. What if the signal failed? What if the FBI team missed the drop? What if Maria had a contingency plan? At 4:15 a.m., I went into the garage. The van we rarely used still had the emergency bag I'd packed months ago. Tactical gear, burner phones, encrypted drives. I added 2 Kevlar vests, just in case. When Marcus came downstairs at sunrise, I handed one to him. Put it on under your clothes. I said, she won't notice. He took it silently. Friday came like a storm front, slow at first, then all at once. Maria wore black, her hair up, no makeup, a backpack slung over one shoulder. She looked like a college student heading to a study group, not a spy carrying classified files. Marcus drove. I watched their car from my own, parked 3 blocks away with a surveillance relay antenna feeding audio to my laptop. Jennifer's voice came over the comm line. Teams are in position. Stand by for signal. I gripped the steering wheel, hard hammering. Maria's voice came through clear. Just keep the engine running. We're in and out in 5 minutes. Marcus said nothing. I saw them pull into the underground garage. I saw the meet point. A figure approaching from the shadows. Ryan. Then came the final moment. Jennifer's command. Go. Tires screeched. Lights flooded the space. Tactical teams swarmed in, weapons drawn. Orders shouted in all directions. Maria froze. Ryan pulled a gun but was tackled before he could fire. It was over in 30 seconds. Maria and Ryan were both cuffed, bags secured, fake documents recovered. And Marcus, he stood there, hands up, silent, watching as his second life collapsed in on itself. He looked at me across the chaos, and I nodded. It was done. For now. The interrogation room smelled like cold coffee and disappointment. Maria, no. Maria Santos sat across from Special Agent Jennifer Walsh, her face blank, not remorseful, not panicked, just calculating, like she was already constructing her next move. The agents had stripped her of her fake pregnancy padding during booking. Without it, she looked smaller, more compact, dangerous in a different way. Jennifer slid a stack of photos across the table. Tucson, Phoenix, Riverside. That's 3 officers you've compromised. 2 are dead. You want us to believe you're just an opportunist? Maria didn't flinch. Prove it. Jennifer leaned back, unfazed. We will. Behind the mirrored glass. I watched silently, arms crossed. Marcus stood beside me. He hadn't spoken much since the takedown. After he'd given his full statement and handed over the last of his access logs, he'd been processed, formally cleared of direct criminal involvement, but still under internal review. His face was pale, drawn. What happens to her now, he asked. She'll be charged federally. I said, espionage, conspiracy, fraud, identity theft? She won't see daylight for decades, maybe ever. He nodded slowly, like that was supposed to bring comfort. It didn't. Not to either of us. She never loved me, he said after a long silence. No, I replied, flatly. She loved what she could get from you. That's different. He looked at me then, eyes filled with something I couldn't name. Regret, gratitude? Maybe just emptiness? I let her into our life. He whispered. Into our bed. Our home. I pushed you out. I didn't correct him. He needed to sit with that. Why did you help me? He asked finally. Because I didn't want you to die stupid. He winced, but he nodded. After all, it was true. Back home, the house was quiet again. The cameras were off. The threat was gone. But the silence that remained wasn't peace. It was absence, the kind you feel in the bones. I began cleaning out the guest room the next morning, her room, their room. There were no keepsakes, no trace of the persona she'd built, just a few articles of maternity clothing and a burner phone she must have missed during the sweep. I opened it, no passcode, just one contact in the log. Asset, Martinez. Not Marcus. Ryan. She'd always been loyal to him, in the way parasites are loyal to the host keeping them alive. Downstairs. Marcus sat at the dining table, staring at nothing. He hadn't asked to move back into our room. He hadn't even tried to rebuild. We both knew something had been broken long before Maria entered our lives. You need to decide what comes next. I told him. He looked up. What if I don't know? Then you sit in the wreckage until you do. It was about aftermath and what you choose to do with what's left. I met with Jennifer over lunch that Friday. We sat at a small table on a shaded patio in Pasadena, where no one knew our names and the iced tea came with real lemon slices. Her suit jacket was draped over the chair, and her hair was pulled into a no-nonsense bun, but even off-duty. She carried herself like a woman who could ruin your life in 3 sentences or less. She slid a folder across the table. "This just came in from Homeland," she said. "Final briefing on the Maria Santos operation. You're listed as primary civilian contributor." I raised a brow. "That's a nice way of saying I did your job." She smirked. "We'll be offering you a contract." "I'm not ready to go back." I said. "Who said anything about going back? We want you moving forward. Consulting, domestic intel cases, asset analysis. Something quiet. Something that uses your brain without risking your heart." I thought about it. Maybe. Jennifer leaned in. "You're good at this. Better than most of us." "I'm tired," I admitted. "Then rest," she said. "But don't disappear. We still need people like you." When I got home that evening, the house felt different again. Not haunted anymore. Just quiet. I found Marcus in the backyard, sitting on the edge of the garden bed he'd once built for me back when we still believed in long-term things like roots and seasons and forever. He stood when he saw me, a little awkward, a little hopeful. "Mind if we talk?" I crossed my arms. "Go ahead. I put in my resignation today." He said. That caught me off guard. "Why I need to start over? Somewhere new?" "I can't serve a badge I disgraced. I don't want pity, and I can't work beside people who looked the other way for so long." He shrugged. "Maybe I'll go back to teaching. Or carpentry. Something that doesn't involve guns and lies." I nodded. "That sounds healthy." He stepped closer but stopped short, as if recognizing the invisible line that still existed between us. "I don't expect forgiveness, Elena, but I want you to know I'm trying. Not for you. Not to win you back. Just because I can't live with the man I became." I held his gaze. "That's something." He looked down, then back up. If you hadn't stepped in, I wouldn't be standing here." I didn't deny it, because it was true. "Take care of yourself, Marcus," I said, and meant it. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and listened to the sounds of my neighborhood kids playing. A dog barking, sprinklers humming. Life. Normal life. It had almost been stolen from me, but I'd reclaimed it, piece by piece. I pulled out the folder Jennifer had given me and flipped through the pages: surveillance reports, timeline summaries, classified memos marked eyes only. One note caught my eye. Santos had advanced handler training, likely ex-Intel, unknown origin. She was running a long game, but she didn't count on emotional interference. That's what broke her cover. Emotional interference saved the operation. I smiled. She didn't count on me. Didn't count on a woman who had once patched up wounded soldiers in Afghanistan, knowing how to trace lies through silence and smiles. Didn't count on the ex-wife being the one who pulled the trigger not with a gun, but with truth. In the end, she underestimated the person most people forget about in stories like these. The one who stayed. The one who fought. The one who cleaned up the wreckage. The one who survived. The locksmith came at 9:00 a.m. sharp. He was polite, efficient, and didn't ask why a woman with military posture and dark circles under her eyes wanted every lock in her house rekeyed, including the basement, attic, garage, and even the linen closet. "Bad breakup?" he asked, smiling nervously as he unscrewed the deadbolt on the back door. "Something like that," I said. I didn't explain further. When he left, the house felt safer, but also lonelier. Empty, but not clean. Like air that hasn't been opened in a while. Like a memory sealed into drywall. I spent the next few days clearing out things that no longer served me the tie rack Marcus never used. The set of crystal glasses we got as a wedding gift and never touched. The antique crib I'd once stored in the attic, just in case. There would be no just in case anymore. Only decisions. Intentional ones. I sold the crib to a young couple who drove 2 hours from San Diego to pick it up. The woman was pregnant, really pregnant, and radiant with that mix of joy and terror that comes before becoming a mother. She rubbed her belly as she stared at the woodwork. "You sure you want to let it go? This is beautiful." I nodded. "I am." Because holding on to something doesn't make it real. And letting go of it doesn't mean it never mattered. I wished them luck, then watched them drive off, laughing together in the front seat. Later that evening, I received a call from Jennifer. "Your deposition's on the calendar," she said. "2 weeks from today. Federal courthouse. They'll ask about surveillance, intel, and your interaction with Santos. I'll be ready. They'll also ask about Marcus." I hesitated. "He's not the story anymore." "Maybe not," she said. "But he's still in the frame. And the prosecution wants the whole picture." "I understood," she added. "There's talk of Maria pleading out. Life without parole in exchange for cooperation." I raised an eyebrow. "She'll never give them everything." "She might," Jennifer said. "She's smart enough to know the only thing more valuable than secrets is being the one who sells them first. Let me guess. No one trusts her." Jennifer exhaled. "Not even the bureau." "Good." I hung up and went into the living room, where the walls were finally bare. The wedding photos were gone. The memory board Maria had faked baby shower invites, sonogram printouts, pastel Polaroids shredded, burned, and tossed. In their place, I hung a map, a world map, the kind with pins and string, places I'd been, places I wanted to go, operations I'd worked on, and people I'd lost. It wasn't about nostalgia. It was about control. This was my story now, and I intended to live it. That weekend, Marcus came by one last time. He waited outside the front gate, unsure if he was still welcome. I opened it but didn't invite him in. He held out a small envelope. Final paperwork. Property split. I had a lawyer look it over. "Everything's clean." I took it without looking inside. He lingered. I thought maybe we'd say goodbye. I studied his face. He looked older than he had a month ago. Not just tired, but honest. Stripped down. Like someone who'd seen the inside of his own flaws and didn't try to explain them away. "Goodbye, Marcus." He nodded, smiled faintly, and walked back to his car. That was the last time I saw him. Later that night, I poured a glass of wine and stepped out onto the porch. The air was cool, and the neighborhood quiet. No cameras, no code words, no lies humming beneath the floorboards. Just stillness. And me. Whole again, not because I'd returned to what I was, but because I'd allowed myself to become something new. The kind of woman who survived betrayal. The kind who could still drink wine on a Friday night and imagine a life not built from damage, but from strength. Because survival wasn't the ending, it was just the next beginning. The phone rang at 3:14 a.m. I was awake, already sitting in the dark with a mug of black coffee cooling between my hands. Insomnia had become a familiar companion, less of a burden now, more of a signal. A reminder that deep healing rarely arrives wrapped in silence. I glanced at the caller ID unknown number. Blocked. Rerouted. Probably federal. I answered anyway. "Elena." A pause. Then Jennifer's voice. Low and urgent. "She's trying to make a deal." I didn't have to ask who she was. "She's claiming she has intel about a sleeper cell operating out of Mexico City. Names, contacts, strategic leaks. Says it'll shut down 3 black market pipelines. And she wants what I asked, already knowing the answer. Minimum security facility. Limited surveillance. Some form of work release in 5 years. I let out a dry laugh. She thinks she can charm her way into a second chance. She's convincing, Jennifer admitted. Even got a few junior agents leaning her way. They weren't in the house, I said. They didn't see her play you like a piano with perfect pitch. Jennifer sighed. I wanted you to know before it hits my desk for a formal recommendation. I'll bury it. But others might not. She'll do it again. I said. The name will change, but the playbook won't. We're already tracking chatter from known affiliates, she said. It's worse than we thought. You weren't just collateral. Elena, you were target adjacent. That hit a nerve. Let them come, I replied. I've already rebuilt once. They won't catch me off guard again. After we hung up, I stood at the window for a long time, watching the stillness of my street. Nothing stirred. The world was holding its breath. But I wasn't afraid. Fear was an old friend, one I'd stopped bowing to. The next day, I drove out to the coast. I hadn't seen the ocean in months. Not since the first unraveling of my marriage. The sun was high, the water cold and infinite. I took off my boots and walked into the tide, just far enough to remind myself what movement felt like. I'd been so still for so long. Survival requires stillness, but living that demands motion. Back home, I opened a new case file. Not federal, not tied to Maria, or Marcus, or betrayal. A missing persons case from Nevada. A woman who disappeared after reporting domestic abuse, whose husband had police connections, political ties, and a sealed file history that smelled like bleach and blood. Jennifer had forwarded it to me quietly. No strings, just a simple message. Thought this one might speak to you. It did. Not because it mirrored my own story, but because it reminded me what my story hadn't become. I was alive. I wasn't buried under someone else's decisions. I wasn't broken. I wasn't done. The woman in that file. She still had a chance if someone like me got involved. And maybe, just maybe, helping her would help finish the healing I hadn't realized still lingered in my bones. I printed the file, labeled the folder, pinned it to the board beneath the map of my past. Then I turned to the future. This wasn't revenge. This was purpose. And purpose, when reclaimed from ruin, is more dangerous than anything Maria Santos ever saw coming. The missing woman's name was Ava Lennox, 32, mother of one, nurse practitioner. Reported her husband for abuse twice. Both cases were dropped. The second one, 3 days before she vanished, never even made it into the system. Her file wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It whispered. And I had learned, the hard way, that the quiet cases were the ones worth chasing. I spent 3 days combing through Ava's digital footprint, deleted texts, redacted police interviews, a string of carefully wiped social media profiles. Her ex-husband, David Lennox, was an up-and-coming city official with friends in law enforcement and a clean image that was too polished, too curated. He'd given a tearful interview to local news 2 months ago. We're devastated. All I want is for Ava to come home safe. Classic. The press had moved on. The cops had marked it a domestic departure. No foul play, no red flags. Except for all of them. I reached out to Jennifer. Told her I needed a soft badge unofficial clearance, access to sealed incident reports, without triggering internal alarms. She didn't hesitate. You working this alone? Yes. You sure I was? This wasn't a task force mission. It wasn't a federal sting. It was one woman looking for another before her silence became permanent. I drove to Bakersfield, where Ava had last been seen. I booked a motel under a pseudonym and slipped into the rhythm that had once defined my life. Observe, assess, verify, infiltrate. I visited the coffee shop where she worked part-time, spoke to her coworker, a woman named Jasmine, who dropped her eyes every time I asked about Ava's marriage. She said he loved her, Jasmine finally admitted. But it was the kind of love that left bruises. Jasmine gave me Ava's locker key. Inside was a flash drive taped beneath the shelf. Encrypted. I smiled. The kind of smile that meant progress. Back at the motel, I cracked the drive in under an hour. Medical records, photos of injuries, a recorded conversation between Ava and a legal advocate, the one that was never filed with police. He'd threatened her child. That was the moment she decided to run. But there was no trace after that. No credit card use, no cell ping, no sightings, nothing. She was either hiding very well or buried very deep. I returned home that weekend and updated the board. Red string connected Ava to 5 other women. Different cities, different names, but all had one thing in common. Their abusers were protected, shielded by law enforcement, politics, or both. The pattern was clear, and it wasn't just Ava's life on the line anymore. It was a system, a network, another quiet conspiracy less slick than Maria's, more domestic, but no less dangerous. As I stood there, cataloging names and dates, I felt something click. Not anger, not vengeance, alignment. This wasn't about proving I could still fight. It was about making sure no one else had to fight alone. The next morning, I emailed Jennifer. I'm going deepo. This may be bigger than one case. If anything happens to me, start with Lennox. His financials are off. 3 payments last month to a woman named Camille Sosa. Might be a fixer. Or worse. She replied in under 5 minutes. Copy that. Be careful. You're not invincible. Elena. I stared at her words. No, I wasn't invincible. But I was aware. Awake. Battle-tested. I'd walked through betrayal, fire, and federal takedowns. I had nothing left to lose. And women like Ava, they were worth the risk. I packed a go bag, set the new GPS, downloaded burner tracking apps, rewired my vehicle dashcam to record to the cloud in real time. Then I locked my house, turned off the lights, and drove toward Fresno, toward the next name on the list. I wasn't chasing ghosts anymore. I was hunting them. The safe house in Fresno was quiet and clean, too clean. I knew the type. Furnished by shell companies, paid for in cash, leased under names that didn't exist on any credible government database. It didn't belong to Ava. It belonged to someone who wanted Ava gone. I stood in the kitchen, scanning the edges of every drawer, every molding, every light fixture. There was no dust, no fingerprints, no residue. Someone had bleached this place within an inch of its life. That meant one of 2 things. Either Ava had died here, or someone had wanted it to look like she had. I checked the back bedroom first. Nothing. A stripped bed frame, a mattress too new for someone in hiding. Then the closet. Bingo. A hidden panel. A metal lockbox, sealed with a biometric reader. It blinked red when I tried my thumb. I took a breath, then pulled out my encrypted tablet and linked it to a bypass node. Took about 6 minutes. Inside documents. Real ones. Ava's original birth certificate, her passport, a burner phone, a USB drive marked simply eyes. I didn't open it there. I'd seen enough movies to know that once you flip a switch, you can't always flip it back. Instead, I carefully resealed the box, documented everything, and made a secure call. Jennifer, I have something. Big. I hope you're sitting down, she said quietly. I froze. Why? Because we just found Camille Sosa. Alive. No. Jennifer said. Dead. Body dumped outside a gated ranch in Tehachapi. Gunshot to the head. No ID on her, but dental confirmed. And she had a burner phone in her pocket with 1 number on speed dial. Whose she sighed. Yours. That stopped me cold. What the hell does that mean? I asked. It means whoever killed her wanted you to find her. Or they wanted someone else to think you were involved. A chill worked its way down my spine. Not fear, but precision. They were escalating. Framing me was a bold move. Stupid if they thought I'd go down quietly. Send me everything, I said. It's already on its way. Elena, be careful, but it was already too late for careful. As I hung up, I noticed movement on my security feed. A car parked 3 houses down, black SUV, windows tinted, not local, not random. I grabbed the lockbox, slid it into my duffel, and exited out the back. I moved low through the alley, took the fire escape to the neighboring building, and circled back to my own car from the north. They never saw me coming. By the time I pulled onto the highway heading south, I'd already cloned the USB onto a virtual drive and uploaded it to my cloud storage. Then I opened it. It wasn't what I expected. Not intel, not surveillance. It was video. Ava, speaking directly into the camera. She looked exhausted, eyes rimmed with tears, but there was fire in her voice. If you're watching this, I didn't disappear. I was erased. I was hunted. Because I found something I wasn't supposed to about my husband and the people he protects. She held up a folder labeled Shield Stream. I don't know how deep it goes, but if you're out there, if you're like me, don't stop. They'll try to scare you. They'll try to bury you, but they don't control the truth. We do. The screen cut to black. Then, coordinates. Encrypted. Off-grid. I pulled onto the shoulder and rerouted my GPS. Ava was alive. Somewhere. And she had left a breadcrumb trail only someone like me could follow. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. This was a reckoning. The moon above was full, sharp against the black. A hunter's moon. Fitting. Because for the first time since Maria Santos walked into my life, I wasn't reacting. I was coming for them. The coordinates led me into the Sierra foothills, 20 miles past the last cell tower, where the trees grew so thick they swallowed the road in shadow. I kept the car lights off for the last half-mile and navigated by moonlight. Just before the path ended, I saw a small cabin nestled between rock outcroppings, hidden from aerial view. No lights, no sound, no welcome. I parked the car and waited. 5 minutes, then 10. Then the door creaked open. She stepped out slow, cautious, her figure backlit by the faint glow of a single candle inside. Ava Lennox, alive, barely. She was thinner, paler, and her eyes scanned the dark like an animal born into fear. But when she saw me, her shoulders dropped not with relief, but with exhaustion. You're Elena, she said. Not a question. Yes. Did the USB make it? It did. Jennifer has the files. You're safe now. Ava shook her head. No one's safe. Not yet. Inside the cabin. She had evidence binders of documents, hard drives, audio recordings, all labeled and meticulously logged. She'd been building a shadow archive while the world assumed she was dead. David was a handler, she explained, for ShieldStream, a privatized intelligence front built to manipulate local law enforcement and neutralize whistleblowers. Funded through dummy grants, shielded by political donations, women like me, we were always the first to vanish. She wasn't hiding. She was preparing, waiting for someone who could finish what she started. You think they know where you are? I asked. Not yet. But they will soon. We burned the paper files that night, everything we digitized and transmitted to Jennifer through a layered satellite uplink. No more trails, no more vulnerabilities. By dawn, we were back on the road, heading toward the city. ShieldStream was already under review. Jennifer had launched 3 sealed indictments with names I didn't recognize but would soon. Back in L.A., Marcus had texted me just 2 words. Thank you. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. He'd found a job teaching criminal law at a community college. It suited him quiet, thoughtful, out of the line of fire. I hoped he was learning what justice looked like outside of a badge. As for Maria Santos, she took the plea. Life without parole, no release, no deals. Her silence, in the end, was her confession. But she didn't win, because I was still here. Ava stayed with me for a few days while the Bureau secured her safe relocation. Her son, hidden with a friend since the beginning, was reunited with her at a quiet, tearful ceremony I didn't attend. Some reunions weren't for audiences. One night, as we sat on my porch, she turned to me and said, "Why did you come for me?" I thought about it. Not just about her, about the women before her, about the lies we let live too long, about how close I'd come to disappearing inside my own silence. Because no one came for me when it started. I said, "And I know how it ends if no one does." She nodded, eyes shining but steady. "You saved me." "No," I said. "I believed you. You saved yourself." By the end of the week, she was gone off grid, safe, and finally, truly free. I closed the door behind her and sat down at my desk. The map was still on the wall, but now, the red threads were joined by blue ones. Not warnings, not targets, connections, lives intersected, stories reclaimed, damage repurposed into resistance. This wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. This was the new work, helping those who hadn't yet found their voice, tracking the networks that preyed on silence, rebuilding something stronger than justice. Truth with teeth. The wind shifted outside, carrying the scent of night jasmine through the window. I closed my eyes, breathed, then opened a new file. There would always be another Ava, and I'd be ready.